Branch Line Engines by the Reverend W. Audrey. Read and adapted by Joshua Boston. Thomas comes to breakfast. Thomas the tank engine has worked his branch line for many years, and he knows it very well. "You know just where to stop, Thomas," laughed his driver one day. "You could almost manage without me." Thomas became conceited. He didn't realize that his driver was joking. Later, he boasted to the other engines. "Driver says I don't need him now," he told Toby and Percy. "Don't be so daft," snorted Percy. "I'd never go anywhere without my driver," said Toby earnestly. "I'd be frightened." "Ha," said Thomas. "I'm not scared." "You never dare." "I would then. You'll see." It was dark the next morning when the firelighter came. Thomas drowsed comfortably as the warmth spread through his boiler. He woke again in daylight. Percy and Toby were still asleep. Thomas suddenly remembered. "Silly stick-in-the-muds," he chuckled. "I'll show them. Driver hasn't come yet, and he said I could manage without him. So here goes." He cautiously tried just one piston, then the other. They're moving, he whispered. "I'll just go out, and then I'll stop and whoosh! That'll make him jump." Very, very quietly, he headed for the door. Thomas thought he was being clever, but really he was only moving because a careless cleaner had meddled with his controls. He soon found his mistake. He tried to whoosh, but he couldn't. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. He just kept rolling along. "The buffers will stop me," he thought hopefully. But that siding had no buffers. It just ended at the road. Thomas's wheels leapt the rails and crunched through the tarmac. "Horrors!" he cried and shut his eyes. He didn't dare look at what was coming next. Just up ahead was the station master's house. The station master was about to have breakfast with his family. They were eating ham and eggs. Suddenly there was a bursting crash. The house rocked, broken glass tinkled, and plaster peppered their plates. Thomas had collected a bush on his travels. He peered anxiously into the room through its leaves. He couldn't speak. The station master was furious. He grimly strode out and shut off steam. His wife picked up her plate. "You miserable engine!" she scolded. "Just look what you've done to our breakfast! Now I shall have to cook some more!" She banged the door. More plaster fell. This time it fell on Thomas. Thomas felt depressed. The plaster was tickly. He wanted to sneeze, but he didn't dare in case the house fell on him. Nobody came for a very long time. Everyone was much too busy. At last, workmen arrived and propped up the house with strong poles. They laid rails through the garden, and then the Scottish twin engines, Donald and Douglas, arrived. "Do not fret yourself, Thomas. We'll soon have you back on the rails," they laughed. Puffing heavily, the twins managed to haul Thomas back to the yard. His funnel was bent. Bits of fencing, the bush, and a broken window frame festooned his front, which was badly twisted. He looked comic. The twins laughed and left him. He was in disgrace, but there was worse to come. "You're in a lot of trouble, Thomas. You are a really naughty engine." "No, sir. I'm sorry, sir." Thomas's voice was muffled behind his bush. "You must go to the works and have your front end mended. It will be a very long job." "Yes, sir," faltered Thomas. "Meanwhile," said Sir Topham Hatt, "a diesel railcar will do your work." A diesel, sir?" spluttered Thomas. "Yes, Thomas. Diesels always stay in their sheds until they are wanted. Diesels never gallivant off to breakfast in station masters' houses." Sir Topham Hatt turned on his heel and walked sternly away. Daisy. Percy and Toby were worried. Thomas's recent accident had caused a great deal of trouble, and Sir Topham Hatt stood on the platform with important news. They watched him anxiously. "Here," he said, "is Daisy, the diesel railcar who has come to help while Thomas is indisposed." "Please, sir," asked Percy, "will she go when Thomas comes back, sir?" "That depends," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Meanwhile, however long she stays, I hope you will both make her feel welcome and comfortable." "Yes, sir." "We'll try, sir," said the engines. "Good. Run along now and show her the shed. She will want to rest after her journey." Daisy was hard to please. She shuddered at the engine shed.
"This is dreadfully smelly,"
she announced.
"I'm highly sprung, and anything smelly is bad for my swerves."
Next, they tried the carriage shed.
"This is better,"
said Daisy.
"But whatever is that rubbish?"
The rubbish turned out to be Annie, Clarabelle, and Henrietta, who were most offended. "We won't stay here to be insulted," they fumed. Percy and Toby had to take them away and spend nearly half the night soothing their hurt feelings. The engines woke up the next morning feeling exhausted. Daisy, on the other hand, felt bright and cheerful.
"Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo!"
she tooted as she came out of the yard and back to the station.
"Look at me,"
she purred to the waiting passengers.
"I'm the latest diesel, highly sprung and right up to date. You won't want Thomas's bumpy old Annie and Clarabelle now."
The passengers were interested. They climbed in and sat down comfortably, waiting for Daisy to start. But she never did. Every morning, a van is coupled to Thomas's first train. The farmers send their milk to the station, and Thomas takes it down to the dairy. Thomas never minds the extra load. But Daisy did. She saw that the milk van was about to be coupled up to her and was most indignant.
"Do they expect me to pull that?"
she asked as she stopped purring. "Surely," said her driver, "you can pull one van."
"I won't,"
said Daisy.
"Percy can do it. He loves messing about with freight cars."
She began to shudder violently. "Nonsense," said her driver. "Come on now, back down." Daisy lurched backwards. She was so cross she blew a fuse.
"Told you,"
she said, and stopped. The shunter, the conductor, the station master, and her driver all argued with her. But it was no use.
"It's fitter's orders,"
she said. "What is?"
"My fitter is a very nice man. He's interested in my case. He comes every week and examines me carefully. 'Daisy,' he says, 'never pull. You're highly sprung, and pulling is bad for your swerves.' So that's how it is,"
finished Daisy. "Stuff and nonsense," said the station master. "I can't understand," said the shunter. "Whatever made Sir Topham Hatt send us such a feeble—"
"Feeble? Feeble?"
spluttered Daisy.
"Let me—"
"Stop arguing," grumbled the passengers. "We're late already." So they uncoupled the van, and Daisy purred away, feeling very pleased with herself. She could now enjoy her journey.
"That's a good story,"
she chuckled.
"I'll just do what work I choose, and no more."
But she said it to herself. Bullseyes. Toby the tram engine has both cow catchers and side plates. They help to prevent animals from getting hurt if they should stray onto the line. Daisy thought Toby's fenders were silly.
"You're afraid of getting hurt yourself,"
she flounced. "I'm not," huffed Toby indignantly.
"Yes, you are. I don't have stupid cow catchers, but I'm not frightened. I just toot, and they'd all go away."
"But they don't," said Toby simply.
"They would with me. Animals always run if you toot and look them in the eye."
"Even bulls?"
"Even bulls,"
said Daisy confidently. Of course, she had never met a bull, but she purred away quite unconcerned. At the level crossing, cars waited behind gates to let her pass. She tooted at a farm crossing, and a horse and cart halted while she went by. She said,
It's easy. I just toot, and they all stand aside. Poor little Toby. I'm sorry he's frightened.
At the next station, a policeman was waiting. Hello. There's a bull on the line. Please persuade it to return to the farm, he said. Daisy was excited.
Now,
She thought.
I'll show Toby how to manage bulls.
Now, Champion isn't necessarily a fierce bull, but this morning he was cross. They had driven him away before he'd finished breakfast and put him in a cattle float. They pulled him and pushed him, prodded and slapped him, but he wouldn't go. He broke away and trotted down the road. He saw a fence, jumped it, and slithered down a slope. Champion was surprised. This was a new kind of field. It had a brown track at the bottom. But there was plenty of lush green grass on each side, and he was still hungry. Now for my breakfast, he thought.
Yoo-hoo!
Tooted Daisy.
Go on.
Champion had his back to her and was too busy chomping to take any notice.
Yoo-hoo!
Said Daisy again. Champion kept grazing.
This is all wrong.
Thought Daisy.
How can I look him in the eye if he won't turn around? Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo!
At last, Champion turned and noticed Daisy. "Meow," he said, and came towards her, still chewing. He wondered what she was.
Oh,
Murmured Daisy feebly.
why doesn't he run away?
The conductor and the policeman tried to shoo Champion, but he wouldn't stay shooed. As soon as they turned away, he came back. He was a most inquisitive animal. "Come on, Daisy," said her driver. "He's harmless,"
Yes,
said Daisy unhappily.
you know he's harmless, and I know he's harmless. But does he know? Oh, look at his horns! If I bumped into them, he might hurt me. Them. The farmer wouldn't like that.
Champion came close and sniffed at Daisy.
Ew!
Said Daisy, backing hastily. And that was that. Daisy did no more. Toby was both bemused and amused to see her back at the station so soon. The passengers told him about the bull. He chuckled. "Bulls always run if you toot and look 'em in the eye, eh, Daisy?" Daisy stayed silent. "Oh, well," continued Toby, "we can live and learn. I better chase 'em away for you, I suppose." He then clanked away to find Champion. Toby's bell rang and his whistle sounded, but Champion took no notice to him either. Then Toby whooshed loudly. That did the trick. Toby gently whooshed a little more, driving Champion carefully along the track to where the farmer and his men were waiting. Now, his breakfast over, Champion chundered away with him. Daisy had an exhausting day. Percy and Toby often met her on their journeys, and though they never mentioned bulls, they gave her pitying looks. It made her so cross. Her last journey ended at the top station. Some boys were on the platform. Suddenly, one came running towards her, holding a paper bag. "Look, Daisy," he teased. "I've got some sweets. They're called the bullseyes. I like them, do you?" He shared the sweets with his friends, and they sucked happily.
Keep your old bullseyes.
And Daisy scuttled to her shed. Percy's predicament. Daisy, the diesel railcar's work in the countryside, was full of surprises. But she was frightened of cows and bulls, and she still remained very lazy and stubborn. One day, Toby brought Henrietta to the top station where Percy was grumpily shunting. "Hello, Percy," he said. "I see Daisy's left the milk behind again." "I'll have to make a special journey with it, I suppose. Anyone would think I had nothing to do," grumbled Percy. Toby pondered the problem. "Tell you what," he said at last, "I'll take the milk, you fish my freight cars." Their drivers and the station master agreed, and both engines set off. They thought it would be a nice change. Percy trundled away to the quarry. He had never been there before. "It's steep," he thought, "but I can manage. Cars don't dare to play tricks on me now." He marshaled them in a lordly way and ordered them about. "Hurry along," he said, and bumped them as they dallied. The freight cars were annoyed and grumbled to each other.
"This is Toby's place. Percy's got no right to poke his funnel up here and push us around."
They whispered and passed the word. "Pay Percy out.
Pay Percy out. Pay Percy back. Pay Percy back."
At last they were all arranged. "Come along," puffed Percy sharply. "No nonsense."
"We'll give him nonsense,"
giggled the freight cars. But they followed so quietly that Percy thought they were completely under control. They rumbled along the twisty line till they saw ahead a notice saying, "All trains stop to pin down brakes." "Beep, beep! Brakes, conductor, please," whistled Percy. But before he could check them, the freight cars surged ahead.
"On! On!"
they cried. Percy, taken by surprise, couldn't stop them, and in a moment they were careening down the hill. "Help! Help!" whistled Percy. The man on duty at the street crossing rushed to warn traffic with his red flag, but was too late to switch Percy to the runaway siding. A slow-moving rooster lost his tail feathers as Percy thundered across, but Percy couldn't bother with him. He had other things to worry about. Frantically trying to grip the rails, he slid past the engine shed and into the yard. "Beep, beep! Look out!" he whistled. His driver and fireman jumped clear. Percy shut his eyes and waited for the end. At the end of the yard, there are sheds where the workmen shape rough stone brought from the quarry. Then they load it into cars, which are pulled to another siding out of the way. A train of these stood here as Percy came slithering down. The conductor had left his van and was talking to the station master. Suddenly, they heard frantic whistling and a splintering crash. They rushed from the office. The brake van was in smithereens. Percy, still whistling fit to burst, was perched on a couple of freight cars, while his own cars were piled up behind him. Percy was stranded. The next day, Sir Topham had arrived. Toby and Daisy had helped to clear most of the wreckage, but Percy remained on his perch of freight cars. "We must now try," said Sir Topham Hatt crossly, "to run the branch line with Toby and a diesel. You have put us in an awkward predicament, Percy." "I am sorry, sir." "You must stay there until we're ready," continued Sir Topham Hatt. "Perhaps it will teach you to be more careful with freight cars." Percy sighed. The freight cars groaned beneath his wheels. He quite understood about awkward predicaments. Sir Topham Hatt spoke severely to Daisy, too. "My engines do not tell lies," he said. "They work hard with no shirking. I send lazy engines away." Daisy was ashamed. "However," he went on, "Toby says you worked hard yesterday after Percy's accident. So you shall have another chance."
"Thank you, sir,"
said Daisy.
"I will work hard. Toby says he'll help me."
"Excellent. What Toby doesn't understand about branch line problems," Sir Topham Hatt chuckled, "such as bulls, isn't worth knowing. Our Toby is an experienced engine." Thomas came back the next day, and Percy was sent to be mended. Annie and Clarabelle were delighted to see Thomas again, and he took them out for a run at once, because they hadn't been out while he was away. All four engines are now friends. Daisy often takes the milk for Thomas, and when Toby is busy, she takes Henrietta. And Toby has taught Daisy a great deal. She shooed a cow off the line the other day all by herself. That shows you, doesn't it?